Live from the city of Port Phillip. Welcome to the next episode. Tonight we're talking about three main things. And again, as always, we're live. So if you've got any questions, you've got any comments, please feel free to put them in the comments section on Facebook, or also if you're joining us here live on YouTube. We love getting feedback from you. We love getting tips. So please feel free to send us some emails or text messages. I'll give you the details as the show goes on. Tonight, we're talking about three topical issues in the city of Port Phillip. The St Kilda Marina will be our headline story tonight, followed by some more information on the community feedback survey for the city of Port Phillip, and then finally, an update on the community safety issues across the city of Port Phillip and some local media coverage also. There's my lovely son in the background. Pretty straightforward show tonight, and I'm joined by two local legends and two local superstars. Our resident lefty, Greg Day, who is the editor-in-chief of the This Week in St Kilda newsletter, and frankly, he has earned his subscriptions in the past few weeks, because if there's got to be some Walkley Award or Quill Award that Greg needs to win, because he's broken some big stories in the past couple of weeks. Greg, welcome.
Well, look, that's a big build-up there, Marcus, but I appreciate that, so I'm glad to be here.
Good to see you, and also at the only one of two hat-trick councillors that won 3 elections in a row. He was the councillor for St Kilda for almost 12 years, and also a state election candidate for the Liberal Party in the state seat of Albert Park not that long ago. Andrew Bond, welcome to the program, and former Deputy Mayor also, I should say. Welcome to the program, Andrew.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcus. It's great to be here again, and hopefully the questions we get tonight from Greg are a bit easier than the ones he put to us last week.
Yes, you earned your money there as well, also, Greg. Let's talk about the St Kilda Marina to go off with. Just some context here for our listeners or our viewers. The St Kilda Marina is a state government asset, obviously based in St Kilda. It was built in the 1950s or 40s under contract. Lots of toxic soil was used to build the marina. It's under the auspices of the city of Port Phillip in terms of council. The previous leaseholder left the property a number of years ago now, and a new leaseholder was brought on to undertake development works at the site and also manage the site. Council has issued some warnings, which I'll get Greg to go through in a moment, about what's happening with the future development at that site. But council did go through a process 5 years ago, spending over $1 million, about $1.5 million, running a community consultation panel process to determine what the vision for this site should be. And frankly, the site looks very similar today as what it did back then. And there's some clear indications that the St Kilda Marina project is in trouble. Greg, give us some more background about what's happening at the moment.
Well, Marcus, the first thing is it's a big deal, this project, because it's a bit of a misnomer to describe it as the St Kilda Marina, because it's much, much more than that, because it includes all the retail strip in front of it, the car park, the very big space car park, a Riva, and that foreshore that's created out there near Riva, and the petrol station. So it's a big deal. It's interesting in that the marina itself isn't very large. It's the area that's large. And when we circle around to understanding that, that's part of the problem, is that the marina isn't really big enough to be a commercial marina. And when we say that it's built on contaminated land, it's important to remember that it's actually all reclaimed land, that it was created by putting in the stones, etc., and filling in that land. It's reclaimed land, reclaimed in the 50s, and some of the fill came from places like the gasworks, what's now the Gasworks Arts Park in South Melbourne, and it's contaminated soil. But they didn't think it would worry then, because, you know, it's underneath and the human activity would be on top. But it's more of an issue these days. Now, what's happening, they did this long community consultation, issued a tender, they got one submission. They awarded the submission to that people. It's for $160 million all up value development, which would see a big enhancement of the area, make it more of a destination. So they're really pitching it to be, you know, akin to Fisherman's Wharf or something in San Francisco, where people would come for entertainment and leisure around a marina. So the marina was really just an advertising point, really, because in marina terms, it's actually very small. There are not very many berths there. So if you go down now, there's a lot of big boats there, a lot of places for a lot of parties.
When I was down there, there was quite a few empty berths as well. I haven't been down there for a while.
Well, it's facing competition now for things in Fisherman's Bend and around there in the, in the city side. Down,
and cost of living pressures mean that boats probably aren't the most obvious thing. So, Greg, what are the warning signs that council's fired that you've reported in the past couple of weeks? What's actually going on?
There are two warning signs. One, council has been basically on radio silence on this project for 2 years. They've said virtually nothing, and they put out these statements that are very oblique, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But in the last year, they said that there was some questions about contamination. And then only a couple of weeks ago, they've said that they've issued effectively a deadline to the current tenderers to commit to being able to deliver the project or to step down and accept an interim lease that's basically just a management rather than a development lease. And for the next 3.5 years, so they can start again. So really, they've set 31 March as the deadline, and the tenderer basically has to put up or step down. Now, I guess, the two people in the room with me today, know a bit about this, and they're underprivileged. But basically, the council's doing everything it can not to give the tenderer an escape clause. So they have to clearly say, can we do it or can't we? And if they can't, they get 3.5 years of management. But that management is at an interesting fee. The fee was negotiated last year by the last council, and the fee is $1.8 million for 3.5 years. Now, you'd think that would be interesting, but how have they developed that? Because you have to remember that the lessee is getting the income from the service station, from Riva, from the boats, and from the other retail that's on the site. So there's a lot of
it's pretty complex as well for people to understand what's going on. But the St Kilda Marina site, Andrew, just give us an overview of the geography of just how big this site is and what it encompasses.
There's 5 or 6 private enterprises on there. It's a rather large site. You're not on mute, Marcus. There's private 5 or 6 people, commercial places on there. Riva, there was a little cafe, there was a restaurant. You've still got the St Kilda boat sales, the St Kilda skydive, and a couple of other properties on there. All of the land is reclaimed, as Greg said earlier. It was done in the 1960s by the city of St Kilda. Now, the city of Port Phillip city of St Kilda is a predecessor to the city of Port Phillip. So all of the issues down there with contamination rest with the city of Port Phillip to manage. So it's now up to the city of Port Phillip to deal with this. And one of the issues that the current leaseholder has had.
Oh, that's a shame. We've had a technological problem there. Oh, he's back.
Is it back? He's who's going to look after the contamination on the site, and that was one of the issues that the previous administrator or the current leasee was going to look at and have to deal with, and it was resolved between council and the current leasee to resolved the contamination. So there's now just a number of smaller issues left for the two of them to sort out. But if it's not sorted out by the end of March, I guess the interim arrangement comes into play.
So let's just tell you what the primary information is. It is a bit difficult for Andrew and I to talk about this on the basis that we have handcuffs in terms of confidentiality as our previous roles as councillors. But this is the primary information that's come from the council website. And as Greg would say, if you read between the lines here, it looks like something's going wrong. If AMDC, which is the leaseholder, is unable to proceed, which they're clearly foreshadowing, council has developed a contingency plan involving a short-term lease of 3.5 years, interim lease, with the current leaseholder from April this year. Under the arrangement, council received $1.8 million in rent over the lease term, which, subject to see if that is actually amount, given just how big this site is and how many subleases there are. Ensuring the marina will continue to operate. Meanwhile, council is working with the Victorian government to achieve the necessary legislative approval for any modified tenure arrangements in the marina, as the marina is located in Crown Land. That, to me, is a clear foreshadow that they're positioning themselves to make a substantial change in the next couple of weeks or months.
Well, I noticed at the next council meeting, the CEO report's been tabled. And if you go and read what it says about this, it's totally bland and incomprehensible. And it says that the project date for completion is September this year. So I think there's a bit of speaking with forked tongue happening at the moment, as they would say. So it's definitely a watch this space.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. Andrew, what are you hearing? What any councillors are having in terms of discussions on this issue at the moment, and what do you think is going to happen?
It's all quiet. I think council needs to sit here and wait till the 1st of April comes around, and the operator has made their decision on what they do, whether they continue with their current lease or they go into the interim lease. And I think council's very much in a holding pattern, pending that outcome. And then once they get the official notification from the current holder of the lease as to what they wish to do, then I guess council makes its decision after that.
You got to keep in mind there's a bit of skin in the game from a few people here, but council had to put its nose out, so to speak, and back this proposal when it was put up. By that, I mean, one of the designs that went out had a helicopter pad, had a private beach attached to it. There are a number of fairly controversial elements to it. And I was mayor at the time and had to go on the radio and sort of talk about this project. So there were some controversial elements to it that so far haven't been delivered. So a lot's changed since the tender was awarded. That's true. In terms of funding costs have increased, development costs have increased, and the toxic soil, by the sounds of it, seals seems to be a significant issue. But this is, a key problem potentially on the horizon for the council that they'll have to deal with in the next coming weeks. And it's not getting a lot of scrutiny because a lot of people just don't understand it. But this is a fairly substantial lease. It's a large amount of public open space that's completely unutilised, really. It's looking very tired. It's not utilised, and it's a substantial asset to the city that should be, getting a better capital return than it is at the moment from a money point of view and also a community point of view.
Well, it's the biggest project people haven't heard of. It's been on the down low for so long that, that's created a problem in itself. So look, if they do fall over, and if it's a minimum of 10 years lost, because the panel started in 2018 and they'll take another 3.5 years to do the next selection process. So that's a decade.
Only if they repeat the same process that was used last time will it take 3.5 years. And this was part of the problem with what happened last time, is that when we were new councillors in 2016, a group of councillors wanted to have a people's panel, a community panel incorporated into the council plan somewhere, because the city of Melbourne had done one. So what they had was this idea for a community panel, a people's jury, but didn't have a project for it. So they went around searching for a project, and where that project landed was the St Kilda Marina, which is where the idea from the let's get 20 community members and consult with them and get their feedback, get their opinions, get the red dots out and the green dots and the post-it notes on the wall and all of that sort of thing that went through a 2-year process that cost $1.5 million. But when they set off to do this process, they were so they were so focused on the process that no one focused on the outcome. So by the time you got to the end of it, you had spent 2 years, you had spent $1.5 million, and it was like, well, we've got to accept this because this is what the people want. When it's probably not what the people want, it's what the average of 20 people wanted, because we asked everyone their opinion, then averaged it out and said, oh, here's where it goes, and we put up the average of everyone's opinion and put that out for an expression of interest, and I think the process was wrong right from the start, and that's why we landed where we are with no one really interested in taking this over. And what was down there was very unambitious, in my opinion. There was just no commercialisation, or very limited commercialisation. Is because one of the problems with people's panels is they have lots of great ideas on what they'd like to see, but very little focus on what they actually cost and who's going to pay for it. So when they came up with the process, they came up with this sort of plan. There was no costing, no funding, and it was probably never going to amount to anything particularly great once we got through this process. So that's only one
tenderer, which could have been a giveaway.
There were a couple of councillors that were voting against this proposal pretty much the whole way.
And I cannot confirm how many tenderers there were, Greg.
Yes, that's why I'm being quiet as well. So.
You guys can remain quiet. Look, the other thing is...
Good trying to get into the Supreme Court, Greg. I appreciate you doing that. You're not taking the bait tonight.
No.
I like my house.
This average business is interesting because I've spoken to people who are involved in various elements of this, and one half said the project wasn't ambitious enough, and the other one said it wasn't community-minded enough. So,
and you average out those two ideas, and we get an average proposal.
And the word average is starting to come up a bit for Port Phillip, because we're going to segue to the community satisfaction survey, which basically said we were below average. So, City of Port Phillip, an average council. Good slogan.
Well, the lack of development on that site would indicate that things aren't going the way they should be. The other thing about the 20-person panel that we had for this project was it created a huge amount of expectation within the community on all sides, and I think everybody's massively unhappy. So it wasn't an ideal process, and the developers used very little of it, in my opinion.
And as I said earlier, that the entire focus was on getting the process right, not on getting the outcome right. And it's pretty much a repeat of what we did for the St Kilda Triangle with the orange document and the purple document and all those sorts of things. We got a group of people together, asked them their thoughts, we've got an average outcome. We've got all these community-minded ideas, no focus on the reality of the commercialisation and who's going to pay for it. And we've got all these ideas that just sit there and will never ever be realised, because they're probably done before they were actually printed into the nice little glossy booklet.
I think we're done on this one. Any final thoughts? Okay.
I think we're done. This one is probably a bit accurate.
Yeah, but I guess I reckon the engagement from the listeners listening to this podcast will be like, I don't understand what these guys are talking about. It's boring. They've probably tuned out by now. It is a very difficult thing to communicate correctly, but this council is going to have to deal with the problems of it and put a process in place that gets that place fixed up, because we all owe it and we all need it. All right, let's now move on to your next story that you broke, Greg, in terms of the community survey results. So this has been getting a lot of attention on Facebook groups, etc. Give us a very quick background about what this is and what's changed in the past 3 weeks since we spoke about it, please.
Well, every year the council does a community satisfaction survey, measures a lot of metrics about what the public thinks about the performances at council, and last year the report was received on the 6th of June and wasn't presented to the councillors for 84 days. That's the 29th of August, and which is just before the council went into caretaker period. And then it wasn't ultimately declared to the public until the end of November. So that meant during the year that we were having a council election, this report remained behind closed doors.
Well, and let's talk about the report itself, because it didn't contain good news. As you can see on your screen here, it showed pretty much on all metrics, on most metrics, over the long-term City of Port Phillip satisfaction with the 1,000-odd people that are surveyed for this this data point. Has rated us badly, particularly waste management was a key one that went down. But the bottom line there in terms of overall council direction has gone down to 42, which is very low, particularly from the 56 that started 10 years earlier.
Yeah, the lowest in 10 years is the executive summary, and below average on almost all metrics amongst metropolitan councils.
Now, what happened to the survey provider that gave us this data, Greg?
Well, they've been given the flick, and a new provider with new methodology has been appointed and is currently in the field doing the research. Now, it's like comparing apples and oranges with surveys. So we're not sure of the methodology. I'm not sure of what the brief was, but this could be a case of shooting the messenger. So we didn't like the results. Well, we'll do a different methodology, but we need to do a bit more investigation about that to be sure. But the key point is that, why was this withheld during an election year? And
Andrew, what did councillors get and what did they receive, and what did you know as a councillor? Now we're a bit more prepared for Greg's onslaught this weekend.
I don't recall this being raised with us at all. It might have come to us in September, I think Greg said, according to his information. But by then we were going into caretaker. We were probably winding down, and as someone who wasn't running again, I was certainly not actively campaigning and actively looking for things to campaign on in that last month as a councillor. So I may have glossed over this and thought, geez, that's not surprising given we didn't collect the bins. You'd expect these sorts of things to go down when a council fails at one of its basic services. So I guess I probably wasn't that shocked or that surprised to see those results come through. So it just didn't jump out at me. It was pretty much how I would expect a community satisfaction survey to go a year after you've failed to collect your bids.
Greg, what have you found out about who was in the briefing that Andrew's just talking about there?
Well, who was in the briefing is a matter of public record.
Yeah.
There's an official record of who was in the briefing. And there are a couple of interesting things. The councillors that were there were Baxter, Bond, Consolo, Martin, Pearl and Sekharov. The CEO didn't come to the briefing. It was done by Brian T and Joanne McNeil, and it was done on at 5 p.m. on the 4th of September. Now, council went into caretaker on the 17th of September, and frankly, a number of the people in that room was standing for re-election. They had that information and it wasn't disclosed. Wasn't disclosed to the public who were voting. Now, why wasn't the CEO there? He might have been on holidays, whatever. But the timing of this, is very disappointing. And then not to publish it until the end of November when someone asked, and the excuse given was, there'd be a change of staff and it was an oversight. Now, we've had an official reply, which I published on Twisk. You can see the exact words. And they said, no, it was, the CEO said it was published in a number of reports. So it is referred to in reports, but never published. So you'd have to be, Miss Marble mixed up with James Bond to have seen it in those reports because it's buried. So this is serious stuff, and it's got more to travel, this issue, because there's questions about why the councillors who were standing for re-election, why they said nothing, and why the other senior executives at the council had obviously been reading the report, why they said nothing. Because this is stuff that, I think we were entitled to know before we cast our votes. I'm getting worked up about that. I'm sorry about that. But
that's fine. That's, right. That's why I put it on the agenda. Andrew, you got any final thoughts on this one?
No, I have this memory that the CEO went on leave late in our term, so he could be back for the caretaker mode. So whether this was during that period where he took a week or two off prior to going into caretaker, which is fine. I've got no problem with, and that's why he wasn't present. I just can't remember the exact dates and who was there, but he did take a couple of weeks prior to going into caretaker, where he becomes the council for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I certainly do recall this briefing night, because I remember just saying to myself, wow, this is the end of council. Everyone's checking out, because the level of interest that night on a number of other topics, and I think the attendance was pretty low from councillors and staff also, not a poor reflection on staff at all. But I remember these results being discussed and the answers being provided for them. I don't think there's any conspiracy here that councillors tried to cover this information up, which has been confirmed by the officers. I don't think it was discussed about how it'd be made public. It was assumed it would be made public. It should be public information. It's a public report, effectively. And I'm prepared to give the CEO the benefit of the doubt in terms of the stuff up internally that it caused. Based on the year before, I think he announced or did I see a reply somewhere saying that the survey result for the year before wasn't released till January or thereabouts, which is unacceptable also. This report should be issued within a few weeks of it being received, I would have thought.
Well, he's given an undertaking in the future to do it within 30 days, which I think is the indication of what would be the true and correct thing to do.
Now, this is good journalism from Twisk. This is good stuff.
Well, the other problem is that you're saying that people are checking out, but in that briefing are 4 people who stood again.
Yes, no. Well, even the ones that weren't standing again, in terms of Andrew and I, which is a fiduciary duty to do our job properly, which is to ensure transparency is a core value of local government. It separates us from the states and the federal. And this report, these results should have been wide open to the election. And you've got to keep in mind, some of the election results for sitting councillors were extraordinarily close, almost 2 handfuls of votes in some cases. So, and this might have been a story that was enough to sway that. So it doesn't look good in terms of democratic process, but I don't think there's been any corruption involved in terms of hiding this information. So it wouldn't impact the election.
Well, I'm not alleging any corruption. It's not corruption that I'm alleging. I'm alleging that it's easy to, it's too easy to just say that, we had it for 84 days. We told nobody about it. I think we have to expect more than that. And it's not.
What I also think is fairly interesting is the change in the provider. I don't know why they've done that in terms of the methodology. This is 1,000 people that get this. The interesting thing also was in that briefing is I don't recall the people that do the survey coming to the meeting, whereas in previous years the people who've done the survey have presented the results. I'm not sure if they've done that every year, but I do recall the guy coming to talk to us, and he was a like these. I use the word boffin. I don't mean to be offensive, but these good guys are pretty good at what they do. And they're able to provide insights about where you're tracking against other councils, because they do a lot of them. I thought it was pretty valuable. So I don't know why they've been given the heave-ho.
Well, this will be my last thing I'll say about it tonight, is this was uncovered in the same week that, many, many thousands of people got a letter from the VEC saying, why didn't you vote? Because voting is compulsory. It's compulsory to vote in council elections, yet apparently it's not compulsory for the council to provide them the information. So, and, I think if you were running a company and the CEO had information about the performance and he or she withheld that for nearly 3 months, there'd be a lot of questions to be asked.
Indeed, there are. This is a story that Greg will be all over, no doubt about that. And we'll see what happens. It'll be also interesting to see the methodology of the new survey results and see how council is tracking. Good on you, Greg. Let's move to the next item, which is community safety. Now, a fair bit has happened in terms of news coverage over the past couple of weeks on this matter. It was considered by council a number of weeks ago in terms of notice of motion. Community safety is probably the key issue defined by this council about what they want to focus on at the moment, and it's a huge concern across Melbourne Greater also, but particularly in some key hotspots of the city of Port Phillip in terms of increase in property crime, aggravated burglary, and just what's happening on the streets of the city of Port Phillip. It was considered by council through a notice of motion last year, which formed a roundtable, which I'll get Greg to talk about in a moment, in December, and it was uncovered that it took the council several weeks, in fact more than a month, to write to the Chief Commissioner under that motion requesting their input on whatever local laws needed to be changed. A reply was received from the Chief Commissioner, but as I understand it, and this could be wrong, Greg, correct me if I am wrong, that there's been no response or no formal request from the Victorian Police so far to change local laws. However, in some respects, I wouldn't say bowing to pressure, but in terms of acting on pressure, one of the councillors put up a notice of motion 3 weeks ago now, Rod Hardy, requesting council to consider to change some aspects of the local law. That hit the media last week. It got the front page of the Age newspaper. It was done on a Sunday evening. I think looking at it, to me, I reckon this was someone sitting with a fairly straightforward, someone that knows how to control media, changed the narrative from the notice of motion to be about fining people for being homeless. It got the front page and it got a lot of media, including this report on 9 News. Let's have a quick look at
over a plan to fight crime by making
this
homelessness and rough sleeping illegal.
Local residents claim they're living in fear, but critics have blasted the council for a lack of compassion. More from Laura Turner.
Behind Fitzroy Street, homelessness runs nearly 4 decades deep.
A lot of the guys out here have been out here for years, and I mean years. I've been on the street since I was 8.5.
Lorraine has a home but admits she gathers to socialise.
Sometimes it's hot in the house, so we come out and mingle with other people.
Councillor Philip Mears says that's the problem.
There are people, itinerants, people with drug issues, lying about on Fitzroy Street and other streets and in the parks and gardens that need help.
Business owner Angel Lee was broken into just last night.
It's hell.
The Port Phillip Council has moved a motion to give police more powers to move encampments on.
We are trying another way, further strengthening the laws around encampment.
He insists they won't be fining homeless people, but after robust questioning admits the laws allow for it.
Engaging in criminal conduct, fining is one of the things that the laws provide for.
The word that comes to mind for me when I hear about this kind of proposal is apartheid.
Nicholas sleeps in car parks and on St Kilda Beach.
To be honest, I think it's actually disgusting, as if they haven't got it hard enough already.
Crime rates have soared in Port Phillip and the council is under huge pressure to clean up the streets. But even the Premier says this crosses a line.
Homeless people deserve our compassion and support, not this decision from the council.
Former Port Phillip Mayor Marcus Pearl says they haven't thought it through.
We need a measured response that's backed by resources and policies that actually work.
The biggest
So as you can see there, that was the first story on the 6 o'clock news. 3 weeks after the motion was passed by the City of Port Phillip, and things of it, obviously Channel 9 hold the rights to the footage that you're seeing on your screen here at the moment. But this is interesting that it actually got the amount of news that it did. It was on most news bulletins on 3AW that day, also a bit of coverage on 774 and the front page of the Age newspaper, all focused on Fitzroy Street and finding of homeless people. What's the reaction been in your neck of the woods, Greg? What do you think about this increased reporting all of a sudden and the way the council handled it?
Well, it's interesting. It was a few weeks after the story, really, and the council's message that it was a review of local laws got lost in the rush here, and this is a battle for how it's framed. So is it about encampments? Is it about homeless? Is it about safety? No, there's this dynamic battle for this, and council has lost the narrative about it. They're behind and they're not communicating.
It was interesting watching the media run on this, right? So I know the mayor didn't accept a media request in the morning, and at 2:30 that hadn't changed. So this is for the 6 o'clock news. They'd asked Rod Hardy to go on, a couple of news outlets had, and he refused to. He's a police officer, so that might have something to do with it in terms of not being able to speak as freely. And then calls went out to a number of other councillors that weren't responded to. And then Brian, as deputy mayor, ended up taking it. And I know that as you can see in the video footage, that he was questioned for quite a long time. In fact, I heard the media interview with Brian Mayers went for 25 minutes. As you can see, this footage here, that they almost look like they're fairly frustrated. And you can see that Brian appears to be a bit flustered in the media report, to say the least. But council didn't want to get out in front of this story. They took a very long time to put their side of the story out. They put Brian Mayers out there, who, yes, is deputy mayor, but he's a brand new councillor. I don't think he's an experienced media performer. It was interesting, the messaging behind it. And once they sort of came out saying effectively it was possible to fine people for being homeless, the narrative was lost. The mayor tried to issue some statements on Facebook, but it ran away. It was a pretty well orchestrated media campaign, which I've just got a comment on Facebook.
Well, I think you go first.
Look, just to follow up on that, Marcus, if they want to change the narrative about being about finding the homeless, all they need to do is retain the clause in the local law that they propose to remove that says you are not in breach of our camping regulations in the City of Port Phillip if you are homeless. It's a very simple way to send the message that this is not about finding the homeless. This is about strengthening the camping laws. This is about strengthening the encampment laws and making it easier for the police and the local laws to move on those that are camping, that are causing problems, but are not necessarily homeless. The motion that was put up proposes to remove that clause that says you're not in breach of the law if you are homeless. So that's where the narrative has come from, that this is about finding the homeless. And as I said, they can very easily change that narrative. They can very easily send a very strong message that this is not about finding the homeless by retaining that clause in the local law that says it's not illegal or you're not in breach of the camping laws if you are homeless. And it's a very clear message to the community that we're not going to go after the homeless here. And I think that would alleviate much of the concern that came out in those media articles about this being potentially about finding the homeless.
Yeah, I think this will structurally change the debate also, because Josh Burns came out publicly and said he didn't support the change, if I recall. Did Nina Taylor come out? Did anybody else come out?
I haven't seen anything from her on this, but yeah, the Premier came out. Josh Burns came out.
Sorry.
The Salvation Army Brendan Nuttall, who has a very high standing in this space, came out and said it's not the right solution. So if council wanted to send that message that this isn't the right solution, it's very simply, you can retain that clause but strengthen the rest of the laws that are in our local law that they believe aren't strong enough to allow the police and local laws to deal and clean up a few of these areas that do from time to time get out of control and look very unsightly on Fitzroy Street and Ackland Street and Carlisle Street and all across our municipality, not necessarily just restricted to our high streets.
But the point being, you got two endorsed ALP candidates, councillors rather, and the current mayor who voted for this motion. The Premier, a Labor Premier, has come out and said that it's not tolerable. The federal member, who's also a Labor member, has come out and said he doesn't support it either. It puts those two councillors in a difficult position, and I think it's untenable for them to continue to support it just based on how I know how that politic dynamic works. So, albeit the 9 councillors have tried to stay together with the unanimous vote, I don't think that carries forward from here based on the substantial adverse reaction to this notice of motion. Greg, you chime in.
Well, I do think the other interesting thing is that next week, presumably, is going to be the much anticipated Community Safety Forum that brings together, local experts in the field under the chairmanship of Ian Gray, who's, a noted barrister and jurist, which will be pretty interesting. But council's not saying who's coming. They're not saying where it is, when it is, what the agenda is, or who's coming. Now, it would seem from my point of view that gathering that under that sort of chairpersonship would be an asset that you would want to spruik. But, I've asked politely and I don't get an answer. And, I'm not asking for secrets. I just like to say, who's going to be around the table? Which organisations?
It's a huge issue. But this is the number one issue that this council is dealing with. They passed a notice of motion in early December. They didn't act on it until January. They've now been forced to make more actions through another notice of motion. They've lost control of their own narrative in terms of how they can communicate this effectively, and the problem's continuing to get worse. Now, I made a prediction in our prediction show. I think this will get better, and we saw some decisive action from the Premier yesterday in terms of changing bail laws, which would be welcomed. But, this is going to be a problem for council in that it's acting, I think, too slowly on this roundtable, which they promised.
Well, and last week,
I was going to say the same thing, Marcus, that I think this messaging has gotten away from council also. They passed the motion back in December. They were all new and thinking we've got to show the community we're doing something. And they came up with the idea of a roundtable, which effectively kicked the can down the road and gave them 3 or 4 months. They're now at the point where those 3 or 4 months up and the community are demanding to know what's happening. They've come up with a person to chair the round table and said, well, he's an eminent person. He's out there. Look at us. We've got some really important person who lives locally. But when you look at the background of Ian Gray, and I'm sure he was a fine magistrate, a fine coroner, and a fine barrister, but I think he's just the wrong person to be chairing this event. We came out yesterday, and the Premier came out yesterday and said she's going to reform the bail laws because they were one part of the problem with crime and safety currently in this state. But the other part of the problem is the magistrates and the judges who have been releasing people again and again and again and again. And whether he made any decisions or not, as the chief magistrate, the person chairing the roundtable has to take some of the responsibility for the direction the magistrates are currently going in this area. And I think some in the community have rightly picked up that, is this the right person? Is he going to come up with genuine solutions that the community would like to see? Or is he probably going to defend his track record and say, no, we got it right, the way some think he may end up doing here. You know, part of this roundtable, some of the robust feedback that needs to happen to the state government is you got the bail laws wrong, you've got your magistrates releasing people wrong, we don't have enough police, the police resourcing's wrong, and yes, as a council we could probably do more, but these are the things the state needs to fix. And if there's no police in the room, or the local inspector's not in the room, or any senior police are not in the room, the local magistrate, or the person chairing the round table, who used to be a magistrate, is probably going to be reluctant to criticise his past work. I don't think we're going to get anything strong from this community roundtable that goes back to the state government and says, well, yes, we can fiddle around with a local law, fine a few homeless people, maybe not fine a few homeless people, but it's the state laws and the state actions that really need to change to make a big difference here. And I just don't think the community still have confidence that that's going to happen, given the way this roundtable is now playing out, and the way it seems to be meandering along with who's going to attend, who isn't going to attend. Will councillors have input? Like the 9 councillors are the elected representatives of the community in this municipality. They should be the first 9 tables in that round table, so they can hear directly from the service providers and the police and the local laws, so they can make informed decisions on what they need to do locally to address this situation. If all they are is standing in the corner as bystanders, well, you know, what really is going to change here?
So what do we know, Greg? What do we actually know about this roundtable? Thank you.
Okay, well, we know that a report from the chair is going to be tabled at council in May. So that's, March, April to prepare that report.
So the November prediction is wrong?
Well, no, they specifically said May, that it will be tabled in May, that it's going to feed into a process of developing a new community safety plan. Now, who knew that we had a community safety plan in the first place? So we're reviewing it. I'm glad you knew, Marcus, but you were the mayor. But who outside of that knew that?
Right.
And look, in the last few weeks, I've talked to all the candidates in the Paran by-election, and they all said the door knocking was red hot about community safety. I go to the Teal event at the Astor last week, and we get, a pretty candid point from Monique Ryan, who's standing again in Higgins, which is like a couple of 100 yards from Port Phillip. And she said in her door knocking that community safety and the housing were the red hot issues. Now, this is a mob who are standing on climate change, women and integrity, but that's not what they're getting at the door. So there's a lot of interest in this area, and it's great to have a roundtable, but I would think I'd like to know more about it. And, why aren't the councillors there? Why aren't the politicians being invited? Like, our local MPs include the Shadow Minister for Police. We've got a government, semi-minister in Nina. Why aren't they being asked to come along and say their bit or face a few questions? And
I just think 50 people is too many. It's taken too long. We're now at the end of March. I don't understand why this wasn't done in December before Christmas. So recommendations could be brought to the first council meeting. I don't know Ian Gray. I know there was a councillor that backs him and recommended him heavily, which is a good thing that someone knows.
I've spoken to a number of people about Ian Gray, and they might all be my lefty mates so much. Blame me for having lefty mates, but the feedback was he's got a lot of integrity.
That's what we love about you, Greg.
A lot of integrity, and a lot of the coroner.
He might have integrity, but is he the right person for the job? I'm agnostic about it. What do you think, Greg? Is he the right guy?
The coroner is a very important thing, and they don't take any BS lightly. They can cut through that in their manner. Now, I would think, that's why I want to know who's coming. Are they going to send, project officer level or director level from all these community agencies? And I'm also concerned that one of the reasons why they don't want to list the community agencies is that we'll find that there's so many of them already. And what are they doing, and are they being effective? So there's a lot of scrutiny to go into a lot of things here. And, and it's about safety too. Like I get the feeling that the council is worried that people will turn up to this meeting and want to have their say, that they'll have a protest outside or something. That why else wouldn't you say where and when and who? Like, I don't think that's a conspiratorial thought.
Oh, you're probably right, Greg. I think if they did say, well, here's the list of the 20 people who are attending the roundtable, there's no doubt that some in the community would be bombarding them with emails the moment their names are released publicly, demanding to know their position on this, demanding they take certain positions. If they disagree with that person, they'll probably call them corrupt and all that sort of thing. It's about protecting the people involved, because otherwise they're not going to participate if they are going to be harassed by the community, like what many in the community have been harassed by particular people. So it's probably the group wanting to know who is attending the most have probably created a rod for their own back with their the way they have interacted with people in our community over the last few years.
Yeah, but Andrew, how many of those people are there?
What?
Enough to cause concern, enough to ensure that some people have had to go to the police over the years, Greg, to deal with some of the people and their behaviour and their feedback and their actions in council meetings, their actions in the community. So it is a very real a very real concern of councils that if they want people to come down and participate, they probably do need to keep them secret so they're not being harassed and they're not being threatened and they're not being subject to campaigns from a very, very small group of people in our community, but people with a history of doing that.
Well, let's see what the results are in May. So coming to a May council meeting, Greg, is that your understanding, or is it going to be given to council?
That's what they've said. Yeah.
So we'll be interested to see if that's listed with the recommendations that will actually be brought forward. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens, but it's a huge issue. In speaking to some of the McNamara candidates on all sides of politics recently, this and cost of living are the #1 issue. So it's a federal issue, it's a state government issue, and it's certainly a big issue for these councillors, and it's got substantially worse in the last 6 months. And the state government is acting at the moment fairly decisively and substantially on the back foot in the last few days. So it's a huge issue for everybody. Greg, as always, thanks for your reporting on that. We appreciate it. That's the end of that item. That's just a couple of questions for you two. Greg, to start with, quickly, if you could, take us through the Teals thing that was in. So the Teals held a movie event in the Astor Theatre last week. They're not running in McNamara. You ran a story in Twisk questioning why that's the case. But what did you learn? Tell us the sort of people that were there. Did they look after you, given you're the Rupert Murdoch of St Kilda? Did you get red carpet treatment? Tell us about what the Teals are up to and why they're not running McNamara.
The atmosphere was packed house. Both levels of the Astor full. People got a glass of Prosecco when they arrived, and a beautiful, fully woven Climate 200 tote bag. But the atmosphere is excited. They're all in their different teal branded T-shirts, and they're excited. A largely older audience, like 40 plus. Very like an enthusiastic atmosphere. Nice little short film, 25-minute film about their targeting and why they do it, and this tradition of the voices of people that they have. But they've indicated where their priorities are. So they've got the seats they're trying to defend, which include Higgins and Goldstein, but they've got another.
Kooyong and Goldstein.
Oh, sorry, Kooyong. I got it the wrong way around. Yeah, Kooyong, which
doesn't exist anymore. Let's not talk about that.
It doesn't exist anymore. Which, let's not talk about that, Marcus. But a lot of energy but that's interesting. Simon Holmes of Court was there. He spoke. So did Monica. So did a candidate for Flinders. They've got a lot of optimism. They're pushing that thing where they're trying to get Liberal seats to go to them. And I guess, the great wedge in Australian politics is that Greens are trying to get the Labor seats to go to them. So, the sands are shifting and they sense that. But there were two interesting questions. One was...
Just two questions for you. What teal candidate T-shirt were you wearing? And were there any City of Port Phillip councillors there?
Well, I spied Serge, but I couldn't say that.
So Serge Taman was there?
Yeah, I couldn't say whether there were any others or not.
Right, and what T-shirt were you wearing?
I was there anonymously. Okay. I was anonymous, Greg. And
anyway, you said two questions and then we'll move on?
Oh, two questions were interesting. They were asked by, somebody, a bit of a nerd who said, well, with the sort of votes you're getting, you could have got a Senate seat. Why aren't you running for the Senate? And they basically said, well, we don't do that because we're independents and we run in the lower house. So I thought, that's a steely resolve. That's good. And the second question was from an Asian man who said, he said, I'm speaking here in Chinglish. Please excuse my Chinglish. And he said, well, where are the Asian faces? And, I think it's an interesting question. Like, the teal movement is a particular demographic. It's very strong on women, very strong on integrity, very strong on climate, but, not representative of Australia. Now, they wouldn't be the only party with that problem, but, it's an interesting, I thought it was an interesting question. So.
No, McNamara elections coming up. We don't know when the federal election will be called precisely, but it's certainly coming up soon. And we'll do a special there looking at who's going to win in terms of the triangle around Greens, Liberals and the ALP, not too far away in terms of what's happening in the seat of McNamara. And we'll also look at Kooyong and Goldstein also, where the Teals have a strong hold at the moment, but they're under challenge. The second thing I just want to bring up with you, which actually been brought up by one of our viewers also, was the council decided to cancel the last council meeting, which is why we actually didn't go to air last Thursday, because we didn't have much to talk about, because we schedule these shows the day after the council meeting, so we can give you an update of what happened the night before. But in an unusual series of events, they said we don't have enough agenda items and we've cancelled it, which was a bit of a surprise to me. Good in a way, if you've got nothing to say, then don't waste the money of going to a council meeting. Surprising in another way that there aren't council decisions that need to be made at the moment, given that most of the councillors that are on council now had very large reform agendas. And I thought there'd be lots of decisions that need to be considered. And the optics of a council meeting being cancelled is not always that great. Andrew, you chime into this one first if you've got any comments, and then we'll go to Greg.
Yeah, like you, I was surprised that they cancelled the meeting.
Do we have any reason for it? Does anyone know? There's just no business on. Genuinely
no agenda items is what I'm being told. I found that surprising because usually once you've had 6 or 8 weeks off from mid-December through to the start of February, there's generally a backlog of things trying to get onto the agenda for a council meeting. There also would have been a backlog because we had a 4-week caretaker period plus a new induction period where there were no real decisions being made for 8 weeks between September and mid-November, and you only had a council meeting or two to get through all of those things. So usually there would be a backlog going into February, March, and they would be pushing things back because they just didn't want to overload the agendas early on in the year. So it is quite unusual that there was nothing to go on the agenda for that 1st of March council meeting.
Great. Well, the agenda for the next one is out now. they normally put them out on Fridays, but it's they've put it out today for next week. So it's not 2 consecutive councils. It's a meeting in 2 consecutive months has been cancelled. So there is a meeting scheduled for the 19th, which is presumably the same day as the Community Safety Forum. But look, I only spoke to one councillor about the rescheduling, and they stuck to the party line that there wasn't much on. But they were at pains to say that there were still briefings, that they were still working, they weren't doing it, they were still having their briefings. Now,
it's interesting because maybe I'll have my rant here. Like, if you're there's 7 new councillors, I think they're trying to get along with each other a lot with the decisions. But like, you know, this is the thing, you can't sit there motionless and not make decisions around the agenda that you've put forward. So my advice to particularly the new councillors would be perhaps don't sit and wait for the budget process. If you've got some things for your ward or some things for the whole city that need to move forward, now's the time to do it. You clearly have the space, and most of the community is looking at you, waiting for actions to be taken. But the focus seems to be perhaps a bit more internal than external at the moment, is my sort of perception of what's going on the small amount of information that we seem to be getting through. But I can't fathom that after such a quiet period that they wouldn't have a backlog of officer decisions that need to be made to, you know, make structural reforms within the council, restructure programs, get moving, make some decisions.
Even just policies and capital works backlog you would thought would be coming through. So yeah, it is strange, but maybe there's not much coming through.
Well, let's have a good look and we'll discuss it at length. I've got a breaking news story for you.
We'll be quick because we're already 5 minutes over, and I think
real quickly.
I wouldn't say this is the most boring episode, but it's probably not going to have the highest ratings in the world.
Oh, well, I've saved the best bit to the end.
Depends what Greg says next, Marcus.
Exactly. Go, Greg. What's your breaking news? Hang on, I'll put your full screen. Here we go.
Well, it's the Grand Prix weekend this coming weekend. And, of course, you know that the local sporting clubs are always upset that they're displaced for, you know, months beforehand and months afterwards. And there's been a long-standing kind of compensation package that's been watered down, but apparently it's going to be reinstated. And an announcement will be made this weekend that some of that package will be added. And
what from the state government you're talking about here? Is this a Nina Taylor announcement? Have you been invited to the announcement, Greg?
No, I haven't. No, I'm not that privileged. But here's the sting. That, you know, why the urge to make this announcement now is apparently what's coming is another announcement that says, oh, we're going to spend 300 mil or thereon upgrading the pit lanes. And that's, you know, in the context, that's the state government. That's in the context of, you know, how tight money is and how we don't have money for this and don't have money for that. But we've got money for this, for extra pit lanes.
Wow, so, that's interesting. That's good news. You heard it here first. Thank you for sharing that information with us. Yeah, that's a big deal. It's also interesting to note that the City of Port Phillip released a very positive post on their Facebook page promoting the Grand Prix, which I thought was good to see in terms of, you know, you would not have seen that 5 or 6 years ago from the City of Port Phillip, that's for sure.
I'll tell you a little story, Marcus. When I first got elected, I wrote to Ron Walker at the time and said...
Ron Walker was the chairman at the time.
Chair of the Grand Prix Corporation. And I said, you know, that I introduced myself and said, oh, by the way, I'm a big supporter of the Grand Prix. I said, you can rest easy knowing it's now 6-1 at the City of Port Phillip instead of 7-0 how it had been for the previous 20 years.
There you go. The final send off is a Facebook post which I was sent to me. Actually, I'm not a member of this group, but let's have a little look at this that you can see on your screen here. For those of you that tuning on audio, I'll read some bits of it. But it's a Southeast Community Forum. Andrew, what group is this on Facebook? I'm not a member of this.
I think it's a community group based around the city of Kingston down that way.
So an anonymous post has been put up there, and it says,
Janice.
It has come to our attention that former City of Port Phillip councillors, along with the ex-president of the Retail Association, were invited to the VIP lounge at the St Kilda Festival. However, it appears that not all former councillors were invited, which raises concerns about fairness and transparency. And it goes on to say about somebody they fail to understand why this has occurred. They're deeply concerned with this situation. The situation seems to be a mistake and reflects poorly on the City of Port Phillip. I believe it is important to understand how such decisions were made to ensure that this does not happen again in the future. And I urge you, I think it's a letter of some description, you to review this matter and provide clarity and rationale behind the invitation to this VIP event. I can say I did not receive a direct invitation as a former mayor or a former deputy mayor or a former councillor from the City of Port Phillip to attend the St Kilda Festival or this event. But what I do find interesting, Andrew, is you're known for wearing St Kilda Festival t-shirts, but I noticed you're wearing this year's St Kilda Festival t-shirt. How did you get that t-shirt? And did you go to this VIP event?
Yes, I did go to this VIP event, and I took along as my +1 a former mayor, a former deputy mayor, and now retired councillor, which is how Marcus got his invitation. I was invited along because I think I've been a fairly strong advocate of the St Kilda Festival over the last few years. I was invited along as a guest of a current councillor, which is why I was invited. Any councillor, current councillors are allowed to invite along guests to these events. And a current councillor who I have a very, very good relationship with, and I've tried to maintain good relationships with many people I served on council with, invited me along and said, hey, would you like to come? And we've got a t-shirt for you. We've got a $3 t-shirt for you to add to your collection of about 10 St Kilda Festival t-shirts. So, yeah, I very proudly wear this t-shirt. I wore this t-shirt out for our last show as well, and wore this one. And I just hopefully this t-shirt doesn't become isn't the final St Kilda Festival t-shirt, and it doesn't become a collector's item. I fear it might, because I don't believe there's any current councillor in there at the City of Port Phillip at the moment who will champion the St Kilda Festival the way I did over 12 years. So I've got grave concerns for the future of this festival, but I guess that remains to be seen what happens. There, the comment, which councillor? I took along Councillor Pearl as my +1.
It's me. So, yes, we were the councillors that got to go, but I didn't get invited, and I had to go as Andrew Bond. I would note I have been to that event in previous years, and former councillors were invited, but clearly budget cuts have been tightened in. But I would say most councillors were there having a pretty good time, and there were lots of City of Port Phillip staff there as well. So it was good to catch up with lots of those people.
And Marcus, over the past 12 years, I have invited along former councillors to the side of stage at the St Kilda Festival. Councillors that I served on council with as far back as former mayors. They would come along and we'd catch up because they enjoyed the live music, and they would bring along their partner generally as a +1, and it's something we've always done. So I'm not sure it was such a big deal that a current councillor invited me along as a former councillor.
I would say I did go talk to the current councillors that were there. I said hello to I think all of them I saw. Some were more happy to speak to me than others. which is interesting to know. I thought they'll all be friendly equally, but yeah, that's some were very friendly. Serge is always friendly to everybody. So
any current councillor could have invited along any former councillor they wanted to use.
I don't think we're going to get invited next year. I don't think we're going to get invited.
Well, as I said, this t-shirt may become an historical artifact. So.
One thing that was fairly clear is I think one of our key audiences of this podcast this TV show, is pretty much all of the staff at the City of Port Phillip. Because at that event and multiple other events and walking down Carlisle Street, I constantly get staff come up to me saying, we love your program. So at least we're providing that community service. We're way over time. We're crapping on a lot. Greg, you got anything to finish it off before we wind it up?
Well, no one invited me to the St Kilda Festival.
Well, you're the one person on this program that should be invited. Yeah, I didn't realise you've never been invited.
I promote local music and events week in, week out. No invitation to the festival, no invitation to the program launch, no invitation to the St Kilda Film Festival. Hey.
Really?
What
so
going on?
The Teals invite you, all these other people. So current councillors, the mayor, the deputy mayor, Brian Mayers, we still haven't had you on the program yet, so please come on and talk to us. You need to invite the Rupert Murdoch of St Kilda Greek Day to the VIP tent at the St Kilda Festival next year.
Greg, I would have thought you'd be top of the invite list for any St Kilda councillor currently serving.
Anyway, we're crapping on. Greg, do you have anything to close off on?
No, I've done my bit about the drum.
We're well over time. Thank you, Andrew Bond, and thank you, Greg Day, for joining us. We love hearing from you. We want to hear more from you. If you've got any tips, you've got any questions, you've got any comments, you've got any hate mail, you've got any complaints, send it all my way. hello@marcuspell.com, or give me a call or a text message. 0478 136 762 is the number that's on your screen at the moment. I brought tonight's show forward from 8:05 to 5:30, so apologies for that. I just got some family events that you can probably hear in the background that I needed to squeeze in today. So today's program, instead of pushing it back, we actually brought it forward, so it's online for you to see. Well over time tonight. We'll sharpen it up next time. We'll have lots to talk about in terms of, we'll actually have some council decisions to deliberate on. But again, if you've got any questions or information, please feel free to send those through. Thank you for putting the comments up. We appreciate it, and see you next time.